Welcome again, viewers and listeners, to another edition of Globespan 24/7, owned and operated by Mr. Noor Singh, with Devin as our techie operator. This evening, we'll be discussing the role and challenges of Guyana-diaspora relationship, and we are going to examine the political and economic significance of the diaspora with regards to Guyana. Joining our discussion tonight is a very distinguished panel of four. We have Mr. Bhaskar Sharma, Dr. Bhaskar Sharma, out of Toronto. He is a publisher of the Equality newspaper. We have Mr. Benjamin, who I will introduce a bit more detail later in the program, who is well known as a concerned activist, well, not activist, but a preacher here in the United States. And we have the ever-present Mr. Timothy Jonas, Senior Counsel of ANUG, Chairperson of ANUG. And we have the leader of the Liberty and Justice Party here with us in the studio in Guyana as well. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you all for coming. I'm just spending while, and should we call you a remigrant to Guyana and entered politics, and you have won a seat. So what do you think are some of the challenges of Guyana-diaspora relations?
Well, good afternoon, gentlemen. Good afternoon, viewers. Let me say thank you for this opportunity to come and be part of this program this evening. Vishnu, I think the question is as a remigrant. I don't think the question should be, should we look at you as a remigrant? Because I did remigrate. I did renounce my Canadian citizenship. I left my job and a lot more in Canada. So I think if that cannot be the epitome of remigrant, then I don't know what would be classified.
Well. Okay. So you're absolutely right. I should say yes. Having said that, and my apologies and corrections, you go ahead.
Yeah, of course. You know, there must be a little bit of jest in there. There are numerous challenges to the Guyana diaspora relations. I think if we look at it from an investment perspective first, may offer some insight. Traditionally, historically, presently, we continue to look at the diaspora as this ever-giving tree. We simply ask them to send their money, and send their money, and send their money, and then we go and create within the Constitution what I would say one of the most harmful devices to the intellectual well-being of this country. You create within the Constitution something to exclude the diaspora, Guyanese living abroad, from being part of the ever so important parliamentary structure. I think all of us would be well aware that during the formidable years of the PNC in office, and continues today, there is a tremendous amount of remittance that would have kept the economy afloat to a certain extent in this country. And we seldom ever take a look at investment or investing in Guyana in the context of one's time, one's dedication, and obviously one's intellectual capacity. I think that has been one of the parts that has been lacking in anything that any administration has attempted to do to engage the diaspora. I personally believe that it is a bit of a disingenuous engagement when they talk about inviting and encouraging the diaspora back. because what they're not doing at a structural level is to build such a structure to be able to absorb these professionals to come back and really contribute. It is not a matter of just the finances. And until we start to correct that, when we start to look at them and say, look, we are going to build the structures so that we have an opportunity to integrate you back into the system. You could throw all the money you want, but if the structure isn't there to absorb the intellectual capacity of those people, then the country will continuously be at a disadvantage.
And you're also saying, you were mentioning something about parliament. So the diaspora cannot play any role in parliamentary affairs.
Well, there is a clear a clear constitutional clause that prohibits dual citizens from sitting in parliament. And I think the genesis of that was when Paul Hardy and himself started the GAP, the Guyana Action Party. And I have said this even during the campaign trail, that APNU and the PPP cannot agree on many things, and they will not agree on many things. But if there's one thing that they can agree upon, is that A, they don't want a third party within the political landscape of Guyana. So that was birthed to avoid or to try to prevent Paul Hardy from being the face or the political face of indigenous peoples. And by virtue of that, they put not only a dual citizen requirement because Paul is dual citizen with Brazil, but they also put a time requirement in there. Now, imagine people such as this esteemed panel here coming and saying, all right, well, look, I'm from the diaspora, or I'm a dual citizen, but I've got this much to contribute at the legislative level of government. And I really want to get in there because that's where I believe I can be the most effective, or people believe that I can do that. We have no such structure to be able to absorb these people.
And by excluding Paul Hardy, by extension, they were also excluding you, who was in Canada.
Correct, but I was
at
not
that
engaged.
Time.
Yeah, I was not engaged in politics at that time. But if you look at it, we've got some fairly, I'd say, well-known, eminently qualified Guyanese in the diaspora. And I think that if they're to come back to Guyana and say, look, I'm willing to get into the political fray, that they have the kind of gravitas and ability to displace tremendous amount of votes from both of the major political parties.
All right, so let's hear from another politician, the chairperson of ANU, Senior Counsel Timothy Jonas. Timothy, thank you again for coming. What's your view of Guyana diaspora relationships? Any challenges they face? Where do you see us going with diaspora relations?
Thanks, Vishnu. I think we got to try to define our terms. We talk about the diaspora as if it's a single entity, a single unit. But I don't think that the Guyanese living abroad can easily fit into a single category. The Guyanese who have left are laborers, professionals, managers, businessmen, educated, uneducated, and they fit into such a wide range of the society where they have arrived that when you talk about contributions, or you talk about what they can do or where they fit, or even if you look at the nature of whatever remittance they send back to Guyana, you can't treat the word diaspora as if it belongs to a single collective. I think that that is a mistake already. And we have to be careful about that, because if we blur that, if we ignore those enormous differences within that one expression, then we cannot accurately discuss the question of contributions or the question of social importance or economic importance. And unless we can discuss those accurately, then we miss the boat. I see that Lennox went straight into a discussion of political contribution. He's suggesting that there are people abroad who have the qualification, who have the charisma, whatever else it takes, to possibly be successful politically if they were to throw their hat in the ring in Guyana. Well and good. But I think that the larger question really, given that of 750,000 people, you only really have one or two or three successful politicians, is an economic contribution or a social contribution. And that's where we got to start defining terms. You see, the fact is, and we got to recognize it, our most upwardly mobile, or most progressive, or most ambitious, and possibly our brightest, had the gumption, the get up and go, to literally get up and go. But they didn't do that for reasons that were altruistic. They did it, and power to them, for economic advancement. A teacher in Guyana, qualified with a degree, teaching history or English or maths or whatever, earns a pitiful 400 or 500 US, and can reach to the Bahamas and earn 5 times that, and can reach to the States and earn 8 times that. So what on earth is the teacher doing here in Guyana? So obviously, and I'm speaking from the teachers who were here when I was a student, I remember, the best of them, the brightest of them, went to the Bahamas, went to Barbados, went to the States and Canada, and did very well. And the question then arises, well, are we discussing a contribution from them in the same context that we would be discussing a contribution from an entrepreneur, or a contribution from someone who goes up and does 3 jobs just to get by and hopefully to send for family members so they can come up too? We have to start identifying what we're talking about with more precision, or else we will lose the boat just by being big.
But Chairman, I'm sure you would agree that those who came and settled and subsequently did play an altruistic role, especially during the period of the late 70s, 80s, early 90s, in the struggle for the restoration of democracy, in sending barrels at home during very, very hard times. Some of it was altruistic. Wouldn't you agree?
We're conflating 2 concepts. I spoke about their motive in leaving, in running away from the hardship in Guyana. That's a different question from the fact that we all know that those Guyanese who are living in the States and England and Canada remain absolutely patriotic, absolutely in love with their country, and absolutely determined to see things better here. So at one level, back in the days when the hardships were severe, barrels would come back. I will tell you my personal experience, that I was so happy when a barrel would come with second-hand clothing, because I would get to get second-hand t-shirts to wear to UG in my first year. Anybody at that stage in Guyana would be happy for something that is seen as so ordinary in the first world, but is seen as a windfall here in Guyana. Things have changed, but we must never forget that the reality is that those Guyanese who went abroad didn't forget their family members. They tried their best to help, even if it was just by a barrel at Christmas time or a small remittance through Western Union. That must never be forgotten. But we also must remember that we're looking forward as well, and looking forward, the dynamics have changed. A lot of the Guyanese who left in the 60s, 70s, and 80s now have children who were born abroad, grew up abroad, and have no connection, no loyalty here. They've put down roots abroad. They're never coming back. You can't ask them to come back. It's unfair and it's unrealistic. And they also are thinking about their own children, so that connection is becoming more tenuous. And here in Guyana, the standard of living has also improved. So a lot of what those Guyanese from the 70s and 80s and 90s remember of Guyana is no longer the reality in Guyana. And again, an adjustment has to be made. So we have to discuss the contribution, not in the context of barrels sent in the 70s when we were desperate, and in the 80s when we were desperate, but in the context of, well, what does our growing economy need at this stage?
I agree with you. There are different categories of Guyanese abroad in the diaspora, and each category would have a different role to play. And some may not even want to be associated with Guyana at all. In fact, I've come across many of them who haven't. So I just want to make a slight correct, well, not slight, a major correction. Joining us tonight is Mr. James C. Richmond. I think I mentioned Benjamin, so I apologize if I did. Mr. Richmond is an author, poet, pastor, real estate broker of over 20 years. He's a community liaison, community leader, and organizer of the Guyana 50th Independence Celebration and Guyana 50th Republic Day celebration at Gracie Mansion in New York City, the home office of the mayor being Mr. Bill de Blasio. He's also one of the 3 former conveners of the Guyana Day celebrations at York College, and that would go back in the 90s, along with Harry Bassoon and Chuck Mohan, who's very well known as an activist here in New York, going back in the 60s. Mr. Richmond serves on the Mayor of New York Clergy Advisory Council from its inception. And he also has a more distinguished record, and we'll try to reflect on it later on as into the program. Mr. Richmond, my apology earlier for the introduction and misspoke. Welcome to our program. This is my first interview with you here on Globespan. And so you are one of the diaspora people here in the US, in New York area. Are you still with us?
Yes, I can hear you, Dr. Bishram. If I should join now, I'd like firstly to thank the management and the team, especially the event, for making it happen, and certainly you as moderator, Dr. Bishram, and all my panelists here.
Panelists.
Yeah, this evening, yes, real distinguished. You have when you have men like Dr. Bishram and the Deputy Speaker, Alex Schumer, and of course Timothy Jonas. You know, these politicians that are doing so much good in Guyana for their constituents and for the country as a whole. You know, it's quite laudable to join you on this important topic that we are faced with when it comes to the role of and political and economic significance of the diaspora. Of course, we all know that the diaspora is very significant. If Guyana sneezes, the diaspora catch a cold, and maybe vice versa. We are intertwined in many ways, in every way, I should say. And so this discussion, I look forward to having it this evening and to share a few of my points, because Guyana has approximately 750,000 inhabitants. I was talking with Dr. Anne Frank Anthony the other day, and in a certain topic we were discussing, and he said, consider 1 million, because we have Venezuelans here, we have people from Brazil here, we have Cubans here, so with that, and then you take in the diaspora in New York, Canada, and so on, you're talking another, at least conservatively, another 1 million Guyanese, and then their descendants who we have allowed not to have a connection with Guyana because we have not treated the diaspora right. The diaspora feel like they are foreign. For instance, when you go to Guyana, you're a foreigner. It's unlike other countries. Guyana's situation is unlike other countries. Antigua, Barbados, Jamaica. For instance, if I should say Jamaica, they refer to as Jamaican. We Guyanese, we like to say Indo-Guyanese, Afro-Guyanese, and so. If we can only get to the place where we can just say Guyanese, Guyana will be unstoppable, Dr. Bishram.
Well, thank you. Also joining us tonight in this Globespan 24/7 program is Mr. Bhaskar Sharma, very well known in Canada and also in the US and in India as well. Mr. Bhaskar travels to Guyana quite frequently. In fact, I think you just returned from Guyana a couple of days ago. Am I right?
Mr. Sharma, can you unmute your mic?
So while he's doing that, Bhaskar Sharma is a very, very popular singer, musician. Bash, are you
Well,
hearing
thank you,
us?
Doc. What I was saying is a very important platform, and you have really a very prestigious group of guys here today. On the idea of bringing this together, I want to also thank and recognize Noor Bishram, Noor Budram, sorry, Noor Singh, for this, what you guys are doing. Coming back to contributions of what the diaspora has done, let us take our own little happening here in Toronto. You know, we have been publishing Equality newspaper for the last 4 decades. The Canadian government has recognized what we have done. That's one point. I personally did with Discover Your World 6 tourism videos for Guyana before anybody else. My music is played in Trinidad, Suriname, and in India, very less in Guyana. The reason I'm making that, the day is now, the time is right now, when the new president should take an interest in who is contributing. For example, yourself, what you have done, all the right things over the years. These are things that should be recognized by the government. And I think we should have more than that. A grouping of people that will select among the Guyanese diaspora here who has done what for Guyana, so as to encourage other people to do similar things. I mean, looking back at Guyana, a lot of people, prominent Guyanese, are doing fabulous good things for the country. Our own friend Brian Tiwari, for example, in the areas of tourism, in the areas of business. Like him, many others can be mentioned. But the point I want to strike here, the president himself should take a closer look. Instead of honoring Guyanese at home, we need that to be extended in the diaspora here, sir. And to make a long story short, I'm very glad to see you looking so very handsome, Mr. Dr. Bishram, for sharing this great program. And hopefully I'll add to this a little more later. Thanks.
Okay, so thank you, Bhaskar Sharma, out of Toronto, Canada, publisher of Equality newspaper. So I just want to get back to Mr. Jonas. Mr. Jonas, as you said, there isn't one diaspora really. I mean, the diaspora can be divvied up into several categories. How do you think we should group the diaspora?
It's a difficult subject, probably can't be done.
And it's not only difficult divvying them up globally, but in each society as well. Even in Toronto, or in New York, or wherever, there are so many difficulties in categorizing them.
But the reason I started by trying to identify those economic categories and those professional categories is because I think that will help to focus any conversation on the nature of the contribution that can be made. You see, if you're talking about a teacher is a trained professional who has a specific skill, a specific skill set, and the more experience the teacher has, the more width of experience and depth of experiences and longevity, the better the teacher is. I would even go further and say that if the teacher has taught in many locations, so not just in Guyana, but in other countries, that scope of experience makes a better teacher. Great. But the nature of the contribution that teacher makes, if the teacher were to come back to Guyana, would be a contribution that there are people in Guyana who are there, eligible, qualified to fill. You see, we got unemployment of 30–40% in this country. We have a big problem. So it's a simplification to suggest that a teacher who was upwardly mobile and had the gumption to go abroad and leave our hardship to make a better life for herself or himself should contribute by coming back to endure the hardship that he or she escaped, to take the smaller salary, to take the poor conditions, to take the crime and the poverty and the poor infrastructure.
But
That's
it's not
a
practical. It's not going to happen.
Because by doing that, you also deprive a Guyanese who is here of a job. So if we're talking about contributions, we got to start recognizing that that teacher probably does more good for Guyana by advocating where he is, by sending remittances to the family, maybe by helping family members get educated. So the type of contribution that you will ask, that you will expect from that individual will be different from an entrepreneur who can come here, set up a business and create employment rather than look for a job. Both are useful, both are patriotic, both are doing the best they can. But if you just talk about diaspora as a single monolith without identifying the disparate parts, and you talk about contribution without recognizing the various forms of contribution that are important and the evolution. Barrels used to be important. Right now, I tell you, Western Union money goes from Guyana just as much as it comes to Guyana because the economy is evolving. So we need to understand what our needs are, and we need to recognize the importance of the diaspora and recognize that those people are patriotic, they love Guyana.
And when you speak of we, what do you mean by we? Who is involved? Who is included in the we?
Good question.
I think we lost Mr. Jonas.
Yes.
All right, so let's ask the deputy speaker. The deputy speaker should have some influence in parliament. I think by the we, I believe he was referring to the government. What's government doing? If you can tackle that subject.
You know, Vishnu, I started out of the gates like a racehorse that's in a 10-meter sprint. Of course, running 10 meters and you see the next 10 and the next 10. So you keep at it, right? That is to say that at an institutional level, we really have to look at how we engage a diaspora. I quite agree with Tim that there are varying levels. It's not a monolithic group per se. Every political party seems to have their grouping of diaspora engagement.
Yes, they do.
There are also separation in terms of the economic class. You know, how much they have and how much they can give. A variety of different points of separation. But in my view, the average person does not want to leave a New York or a US or a Canada to come back to Guyana, to a country where, you know, the crime rate is high, you cannot get access to justice, security issues are ever present, the financial institutions in themselves are very laborious to navigate. The bureaucracy is very laborious to navigate. And we as Guyanese experience that every single day. So to some people, it may be normal. They'll just say, man, it's Guyana, right? Whereby something should take me one hour. As a Guyanese, I'm going to go in line and have it take me 1 day or 1 month or 1 week or something of the sort. I think we have come to accept mediocrity in the system for way too long. In my view, and I remember when I used to fly, I had a discussion with one of my pilot colleagues, and his position was that he wanted to bid his roster so that he could be home as much as he possibly could. Didn't really care too much where you are. Just look, I just want to go in there and do my flying and get home. And you know, we interrogated the idea a bit, and he said, Lennox, in my view, people take a linear approach to what provision means, to provide for one's family. Time in itself is also a provision. So I also have to budget that time to ensure my family enjoys the maximum benefit of my time. So when you look at investment in Guyana, once again, investment cannot only be about the financial component. It has to be about one's time and what is it that I am willing to invest in Guyana. If we cannot have the organizational nor institutional structures to absorb members in the diaspora who are eminently qualified for a variety of positions, then it really becomes difficult to ask them now to come back and subscribe to, once again, a mediocre system. Don't get me wrong, there are a lot of people who are very, very qualified in those positions, but there seems to be an
Thank you to all of our Travelspan and Amros Travels customers and staff. We are still operating after COVID shutdown thanks to all of your support. Our staff has made the best efforts during COVID to speak with the airlines on your behalf. They stayed on hold for hours sometimes with the airlines to rebook your reservations. We are happy to serve. Our offices are operating at 10809 Liberty Avenue, Richmond Hill, New York, and our Val Park office and GT offices are open as well. Travelspan survived these 27 years with our customers, staff support, and God. In our 27 years, we are grateful to be here with you in the community. So call us today in New York at 718-845-0437. In Trinidad, call 645-1604. And in Georgetown, call 227-1701. And Rose Hall, call 337-4287. Get your meals delivered directly to your home. Order your curry duck curry, goat, or chicken, plus your dalpuri roti and busupshut from allfromonesupplier.com. We ship your meals directly to your home, so you can enjoy it upon arrival or refrigerate it and take it out when you're ready to eat. No more waiting in lines and no more losing time. Now you can treat yourself with a tasty curry and roti. You can also order solos, ices, pear jacks, coconut water, and much more from allfromonesupplier.com. It is free shipping to all U.S. states on all your curry duck curry, goat, and chicken, plus sodas and all West Indian items. So treat yourself or send a gift box of your favorite food, tasty pastries, sweets, and coconut water, or any West Indian item, products such as fish, meat, curry powders, pepper sauces, and much more from allfromonesupplier.com. Call today at 718-551-3292 or visit allfromonesupplier.com. Remember, it's free shipping throughout the U.S. Dave West Indian Products is the only distributor of 100% authentic West Indian products. Dave West Indian supplies fish, vegetables, curry, spices, sodas, and coconut water, plus geese and much more straight from Guyana and the Caribbean. For all your shopping needs, visit Dave's Guyana Fish and Grocery Market. Dave West Indian products are also available in West Indian stores, Key Food, and allfromonesupplier.com. Dave West Indian has a full line of the most desirable products to fit all your needs. So visit Dave Guyana Fish and Grocery Market on 118th Street on Liberty Avenue, or in Maryland at 7505 New Hampshire Ave, or any West Indian stores, or allfromonesupplier.com. Dave West Indian, your 100% authentic West Indian product.
Okay, so welcome back, viewers, listeners, to Globespan 24/7, owned and operated by Mr. Nohar Singh, with Devin as our techie operator. Mr. Timothy Jonas, chairperson of ANUG, Senior Counsel. We had gotten a brief interruption, and so he wasn't able to complete and make his point. So, Mr. Jonas, would you care to complete your point now before we move to Mr. Richmond?
Well, thank you, sir. During the break, I made the point that when we talk about the hardships here, one of the hardships I'm specifically experiencing right now is electrical failure. So we have blackout, lights have been on and off. I mentioned that during the break, and one of the panelists chastised me for pouring cold water on the enthusiasm of the members of the diaspora who may want to come back. Well, the reality is the reality. I'm not going to paint a rosy picture of what is here. I also don't think that realistically anybody in the diaspora who left because of the hardships here, any of those people are going to come back because the same hardships are still here. So the dynamics haven't changed, and we have to fight with what we have. What the point I was making is that the needs of Guyana have evolved. We need creation of employment. So if there is an investor who is coming to set up an agriculture and processing plant, who is coming to set up a mill or a factory, that is wonderful. That creates employment. That is something that should be prioritized. If we have a teacher or an engineer or a clerk in a bank who is working 9 to 5 in the diaspora and is earning a good wage and enjoying a good standard of living and bringing up a family, it is unrealistic to say to that person, uproot and come back to this mud dam and endure what we are enduring. They left so that they wouldn't have to endure the poor infrastructure and the high crime. But we also should not forget and should not minimalize the importance of what they do provide, which is often a base of stability for the family members that they have left in Guyana, a source of provenance in case things get too bad here. We see it time and again. A means for the people here who want to migrate to have a stepping stone to migrate. So the Guyanese have not forgotten where they came from. They continue to love their country, but we have to identify where the contribution comes, in what form it comes, and how best to benefit from it and to show appreciation for it.
I agree with you that an educator or professional would not want to leave a job earning 120,000 US to come to Guyana to earn 6,000 US. It really is not realistic. It's not practical. I mean, you really have to be a really, really outstanding patriot to return to Guyana and work at that kind of income.
Vishnu, can I interrupt you there?
That is yes. A personal statement from Dr. Vishnu.
Vishnu, let me interrupt you there. You see, Tim hit the nail on the head so many times, and your last statement in itself speaks volumes. I came back to contribute to my community in 2015. I ran to be the chief of my community. I was a member of the National Two-Shows Council.
You were quite successful.
Right. It depends on one's measure of success or what your terms of successes are, right? But when I came back to Guyana, I said, you know what? I think that I could offer Guyana a lot more than being the chief of my community. I could also do other things, help in the aviation sector. I had applied to join the Civil Aviation Authority as what they call a flight ops inspector. Of course, that application went nowhere, even though there was a need and still exists a need for aviation inspectors in this country. I mean, I don't see that I'm not overly qualified for the position, or I'd put it that way. I barely have 25 years of experience in the field. But I strongly believe that I could have contributed in the aviation sector. Now, imagine I'm going through, or at least we went through, this political cycle. And through the political cycle, as an indigenous person, having had thousands of years of roots planted in this country, when we went through the political cycle, you get all of these politicos and, campaign folks and the groundworks and all that stuff telling a Lennox human, go back where you came from. We don't want you here, go back to Canada. Now, if I, having thousands of years of roots in Guyana, am being sent back to a place where I have little roots, which would be Canada, what does that say about the rest of our Guyanese brothers and sisters? Does it now say that we only, once again, want your money? Or does it say that we want your voice and your ability to change the structures of society? And it cannot only be about quantity and quantum and quantifying things. It also has to be about qualifying some of these things to ensure that we understand how the Guyanese diaspora can contribute to the development of Guyana aside from the financial structures.
Okay, thank you for that point. Again, let's ask Mr. James Richmond.
Right. So I want to commend Mr. Schumer on his sacrifice in going back to Guyana in spite of the blackout, Mr. Timothy, the blackout and all the hardship that's there, because you felt you could offer something to Guyana, right? And like many others who feels that way. Not everybody gonna want to go back to Guyana to face all of the stuff with the crime and all of that, and with police response not adequate, right? Not many, and I wouldn't urge people to do so under certain circumstances, right? But I there are people who will want to make that sacrifice and go to give back. They don't care how much money they're making over here. So people have made that sacrifice in the past, and some will make it again. But I understand that, like, the diaspora has a wealth of knowledge, of expertise, all right, to offer. And they can offer to change Guyana with all the problems with the blackout and all. There are people in New York and Canada who can fix those problems if you only give them a chance. But our aim here tonight is not really to talk about the diaspora going back, but the diaspora playing a part from here to make Guyana better, right? And so I will stay there for now. But I had to talk about the point where it seems like you don't want the diaspora, because people from the diaspora feels that way, that you look at them as foreigner, you just want the money. In fact, in 2019, there was $372 million remitted to Guyana, 10% of the GDP.
That's official number. It doesn't include the unofficial number.
Official numbers, that's official numbers. And so the diaspora has been giving back, and barrels, and don't talk about 70s and 80s with barrels. The barrel's still going. And that is what has been keeping Guyanese at home in a certain way, because you have the rich guys, you have the not so rich guys who are still rich, and then you have the poor guys of all races, indigenous, Indian, black, and so. But we need to help to equalize that. And so the diaspora can play a part, because the diaspora is being given back to organizations, and helping even in those areas. But now the diaspora should be given an opportunity to do business, to get involved in the oil industry, agriculture. And I think we can play a better role there, because we know that, if you go back, because sometimes you go and visit and you can't even meet up with some of the ministers. It's very difficult. It seems like their schedule is so packed.
Okay, so let's hear from Bhaskar Sharma. Mr. Sharma is a very distinguished singer, and has won many accolades.
That I would like to come in with. We can do with a cultural uplift of that country. I played the harmonium professionally. We had some television programs, and it was so well received. It was very refreshing for aspirants who like to learn the Indian music, to have somebody who can guide them. The Indian Cultural Center is playing a role, but I believe this is an area where the government itself has to invest more on talented Guyanese who are over here recording artists for myself. I have 2 LPs that have been gold received by EMI broadcast, and I'm not saying that boastfully. You know, the Indian Cultural Center there with that Dr. Amjad Ali Khan. Recently at the Janmashtami celebrations, we went over there, full man there. I think you were supposed to come, but you fly the other day or something. But the reception that people are getting from trained Guyanese, and I think we have a duty to select those people who can make a serious cultural contribution in regards to this also. Also in the area of tourism, I mentioned that likely before. We have done six broadcasts with Discover Your World that was well received worldwide. Those tapes should be remastered and sent to embassies around the world. It's certainly telling a story what Guyanese have done before in this particular area. In the area of publishing, 40 years is enough to prove a point. But we are not using this platform effectively by the government. The new president has promised to come out and reach with the diaspora to see what they can do and make things happen. My son, who's doing a lawyer now in the Shad, met him last week. The reception was fabulous. And His Excellency promised to do more in the diaspora in encouraging things to happen. So while we are talking about this, there are many areas to look at. Not only because culturally, Guyana is like a dead soul. We cannot compare that to Suriname or even Trinidad. And we have talented people outside here, your own friend, like some of the artists you have in New York even. They should be invited to come and share their talent, give them free television time, so that they become an example of what Guyanese abroad can do, share with the country. Thanks.
So in addition to political contribution and economic contribution, Bhaskar Sharma has introduced a third one now, cultural upliftment. The diaspora could play a role in cultural upliftment in Guyana, and Mr. Schumann was also making reference to that. The indigenous community diaspora abroad can also play a significant role in cultural upliftment in Guyana, and he himself volunteered to assist with the aviation sector. I don't know if his services were accepted as yet. I'm sure if not, the government should indeed. So Mr. Richmond, not only are we discussing the role of the diaspora abroad, but also the role of the diaspora within Guyana. Certainly, some are prepared to go back, most are not. And Timothy Jonas is of the view, look, we categorize the diaspora, and there will be some who simply just don't want to return to Guyana, but they're very patriotic. And they're sending, whether it's barrels or remittances, and as you pointed out, almost $400 million annually, which is a substantial amount of money for Guyana.
And that's US dollars.
Yeah, of course. Mm-hmm. So, Deputy Speaker, any further contribution based on the response of Mr. Richmond as well as Dr. Bhaskar Sharma?
Vishnu, there are coalescing components that are absent in Guyana, right? I think James mentioned it right off earlier on, is that if you go to Jamaica, they're not, I'm sure they may have subcategories locally, but they don't identify that. It is not the first thing that you're going to hear. You hear I'm a Jamaican, you go to Trinidad, I'm a Trinidadian. What they tend to do in Trinidad is maybe classify you geographically, but not nationally. They'll say I'm from Cove or I'm from somewhere else, right? Port of Spain or... And in Guyana, we don't really look at ourselves in that way. But I also think that we are a lot more diverse than Jamaica and than Trinidad. We've got a lot more groupings, ethnic groupings than those countries in themselves, or those island nations in themselves. And if you look at it, what is the coalescing cultural substance, identity, whatever you want to call it? What is it that we're going to coalesce around? The Jamaicans, they've got reggae. The Trinis, they've got calypso. I'm sure every other island state has their own thing that they do culturally. But what it is that we do as Guyanese? What we do as Guyanese is argue, is it chicken curry or curry chicken? We've got a lot of Jamaicans in Guyana, people who walk around and speak in Jamaican accents or pretend Jamaican accents. We call them Jamaicans. We don't really have that cultural identity that brings the people together. Even MASH in itself. You go out on a MASH parade and you listen to the music. It's not Guyanese music per se. So we're at a loss for how do we find that coalescing agent. But I think also part of it is that there is something of a condescending view in certain strata of society, right? I am strong and committed to my indigenous heritage, my indigenous identity, my indigenous roots. And when I go out there, you've got people who still look at indigenous as tier 3 of society. And it doesn't matter what you do, you will always be looked at. You could go and put forth the fantastic cultural performance, extravaganza, or whatever. And you've got the African culture that is somewhat alive in the Afro community in Guyana, and then the Indo. We have not found a way yet to bring all three of those major subgroups together around one Guyanese cultural identity. And I think that is going to continuously pose a problem for all of us. I really don't want to look at everything through a political lens, but I will take a jab at the historical context. We have done our collective history such injustice that we find it difficult to even step out of frame of it and take a step or a leap of faith and say, you know what, I'm going to embrace something new. I'm going to try something new. We're not finding that. I think the newer generation seems a lot more accepting. They seem a lot more, the younger generation that is, seem a lot more willing to step out of the boxes that were created for them and their families, or what their families created. They're willing to step out of that and be a lot more accepting and embracing of other cultural identities. How we are going to bridge that, it will have to be the new generation. It will have to be that 38% of people of mixed heritage, and it would have to be the youths who are going to move that process forward. So we could do away with all of the old boxes, if I were to put it that way, and create a new one.
Look, Guyana is not the only society with a divided country and a divided diaspora. I'm very familiar, for example, with the Indian subcontinent, and I've done a lot of studies on India. India is very, very diverse. There is no such thing, quote unquote, as Indian. You're either Punjabi, a Bengali, Uttar Pradeshi, a Bihari, or whatever, a Rajasthani. And so when they live in the United States, they coalesce around their own grouping as well. But of course, they do it patriotically to benefit India. So whatever activities they engage in, it's quote unquote India, and it is to benefit India. So there is nothing wrong with these divisions here in the United States. I mean, we will never be able to get Africans and Indians to come together and work closely together in New York or in Queens or in Brooklyn, and I'm sure it's the same in Toronto as well. The challenge we face is to get, as Timothy correctly pointed out, the country needs investment. We need job creation, and job creation comes through investment. And so we have companies, Guyanese companies, others willing to invest. We do have one company, for example, out of Florida that is now building that's shore base. on the East Bank, and others may be in the work as well. So I think the issue we have to tackle is how do we make it friendly in Guyana for investors to invest? I mean, you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I've spoken of the challenges we face. Mr. Timothy Jonas talked about some of the hardship, including one he experienced tonight of electricity, and I'm sure there is a Wi-Fi problem as well. So the question is, how do we overcome this? What can be done for us to have a very friendly investment climate for the diaspora and for non-diaspora people as well? Tim?
No, that is the question. That is exactly it. What can we do to foster a level playing field that is inviting for investors to come with confidence, knowing that there will be no political favoritism, no political ostracism, a fair tax regime, a predictable way of setting up business, interfacing with the revenue authority? That is what we need to do. And that is what we perpetually fail to do. So that we have businesses that come in knowing far in advance that if they talk to the right people, the path will be smooth. But if they don't talk to the right people, they will have all kinds of obstacles up. In the past months, we've had a minister trespassing on the property rented by a foreign investor for political reasons, and the closure of that investment, and the foreign investor left. We've had another foreign investor whose way was smoothed, licenses issued. Nobody knows why or how. You cannot encourage a fair and happy and transparent and predictable investment environment if you have political interference and if the institutions are not transparent and the systems are not transparent so that you know what the rules are. We do not know the rules of the game in Guyana, and that's the first thing that has to change. And that can never change if our politicians insist, as they continue to insist, on interfering in the commercial aspect of things.
So let's get a view. Okay, so let's get the view of the response of Mr. James C. Richmond, and that preacher, pastor. By the way, he's also an author. He has written several books, and these books can be obtained from Amazon.com under the name James C. Richmond. Am I correct?
You're certainly correct. You're certainly correct. I have my book there, Language of Daniel. That's based on the book of Daniel in the Bible. I'm one of, well, I think this, my publisher said I'm the only man who have written the entire book of Daniel in poetry, as well as the entire book of Revelation in the Bible.
And you have also
but
written
be
about
that as it may.
Yeah.
No, you were saying something, Dr. Bishop.
And you've also written about your experience in Guyana and so forth.
Yes,
so what I want to ask you, what's your response to what Mr. Jonas just said? I mean, do you agree with him?
Right. So, and I'm gonna put on my poet hat as well, because as a poet, one who have written extensively on Guyana in poetry and have performed and put on a lot of cultural events that brings the diaspora together as one, using culture, the indigenous culture, African culture, Indian culture, using it as one and putting it at a spectacle where people are awed of the rich culture of Guyana. So we should understand that Guyana has a lot to offer. We know we're not talking reggae, we're not talking soca, because all those are borrowed, but Guyana has rich culture that we can come together on and build and market and ensure that our laws are in place so that nobody will plagiarize Mr. Sharma's music and my good friend what's his name, Guyana Babu, and all these guys, because they're all complaining.
That's right.
It's a big, this diaspora thing, it encompasses a lot of stuff to make it work. Now, business and investment, we need to go there, but we need to allow access and ensure transparency with licensing and take away the politics. How can we do that? I don't know. Guyana is such a small society with so much politics, and we need to and so much race, and we need to do something if we want to make a change for Guyana, and develop, because we are on the cusp of greatness. If we can only, our leaders can only make the right decisions, and then race will be nothing. And maybe Mr. Schumer and Mr. Tim, tell me where one party state can work.
All right, so essentially you agree with Mr. Jonas that there isn't a level playing field and there is politicization of investment. So the question then we'll ask Bhaskar Sharma, who just returned from Guyana. How do we get a level playing field? What needs to be done in Guyana to encourage investment?
I think the plans of the new president, I don't want to praise him publicly, but I think he has great plans. And when you look at the recent developments, what we're carrying in the newspaper, I think it's refreshing for a new Guyana, and that need to be encouraged. Coming back to the cultural thing, which is my area of forte, I believe that we need more prominent teachers who are domiciled here in the diaspora to make a contribution. I'm not satisfied with what we have, the level of television programs, for example, cultural programs, especially Indian programs, where they only show Bollywood stuff. Nothing creative is done. And one brother said just now that we must bring the cultures together. But you cannot mix Indian Shastri Sangeet with reggae or calypso or even Chatni music. They are beautiful in their own way. Unfortunately, pure Indian culture is not being given the importance that these other ones are given to. A Chatni singer can expect $1 million, but a bhajan singer got to get $75 and wait 6 months for the same thing. But because we are Indian, we must accept that. And that's the unfortunate thing. There's no mandir where you have anybody can play the harmonium professionally. And we looked at the Indian Cultural Center, but they only operate in Georgetown. We need to have that in the mandirs. And we have competent people here with the right encouragement. They can come back and make fantastic contribution that will benefit the government culturally and all of that.
So Bhaskar is advocating for equality of cultural promotion in Guyana. Deputy Speaker, or Bhaskar, are you saying something? I can't hear you. You need to unmute.
We met our friend AG recently, and he asked directly the Minister of Culture, where is the Hindu component of the millions that you're spending? And that is not an embarrassing statement. Nobody can sing a bhajan without making mistakes. Where is the Hindi teaching to our people? And this is very unfortunate. You're talking about almost 50% of the population has an interest in Indian culture. And this is an area where diaspora people that have left Guyana can come back with the right encouragement.
So Deputy Speaker Schuman, Bhaskar is saying, we need cultural equity and equality in Guyana, and I suppose not only for Indians and Hindus and Muslims, but also for the indigenous community as well, because their culture have also been somewhat marginalized, decades, centuries, under colonialism, post-colonialism, but we still haven't tackled the important subject of how do we promote diaspora involvement in Guyana affairs.
Vishnu, I think that is the
and basically,
that's
we are talking about economics, really.
Well, I don't quite agree with that statement that we're talking about economics. As Tim and Bhaskar rightfully pointed out, there are multiple strata to what the diaspora can offer. But I wouldn't say that how do we bring the diaspora into Guyana. I think It's a $1 trillion question. We still have not found a way to integrate indigenous peoples into this economy. There is no economic integration of indigenous peoples. And we are in Guyana, we've ever been present in Guyana. Now imagine trying to sit there now and talk about bringing the diaspora into Guyana to contribute, and we can't even find the right approach to the most marginalized population in this country. It becomes problematic. You cannot even deliver the most basic services to some of those communities in this very country. And this is why I keep going back to the institutional capacity and how do we change that institutional capacity? How do we ensure that the diaspora in themselves would come back and restructure these institutions to ensure that there is some kind of a system? For the majority of it, Vishnu, we are still in a banana republic. We are still in a banana republic. There is no public servant who will lift a pen, or if they lift a pen based on some standard operating procedure or policy that is written, a minister could still go there and direct them to change what they do, to alter what they do. And we are still, if you want something done in Guyana, you have to go and see a minister. There is no structure that says, look, I want to get from point A to point B, and this is what I'm going to do. In order for me to get from point A to point B, I have to go and talk to a minister to get me to point B. So we literally don't have that middle ground. We don't have that center ground in terms of administration. And in my humble opinion, there's a complete absence of administration in this country. Almost every decision that is made at a ministerial level, at a ministry level, is made by a minister. Almost every. If you want to get a new sweeper cleaner, the minister has to approve that. If you want a new driver, the minister has to be engaged. If you want a new inspector, the minister has to be engaged, right? Where is the administration component? Where by virtue of the ministry's needs, that the ministry is given the mandate to hire the most competent person, compared to looking at the minister to give you that permission. And that is why I keep going back to this point, that the diaspora has to be engaged in the delivery of services, in the restructuring of these ministries, to ensure that we have a public service, that we have an administration. We don't have an administration, there's an absence. What we have are politicos who are giving directions to the public service sector.
So how do we fix that? How do we change that? So let's ask Tim, and then we'll go around. Can it be changed? Is it practical to have it changed?
Well, first you have to have leaders who have the wisdom and the benevolence to relinquish power, to stop micromanaging. We had an interesting news item the other day. The teachers' union is opposed to the government's approach to vaccination and the mandatory vaccination, and a big fight is going on. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I saw was the decision by the Ministry of Education to take away from the teachers' union the decision-making and discretion for duty-free concessions for cars going to teachers and for scholarships going to teachers.
My God.
So there are so many problems with that all resonate back to what Lennox is talking about. There should never be some kind of secretive, discretionary favoritism system of allocating a scholarship or a duty-free concession. And the fact that it is not absolutely transparent and predictable so that every teacher knows this is the rule. I work for 4 years, I get a concession. I work for 5 years, I get a scholarship. As an entitlement, it means that it doesn't matter if it's coming from the union or if it's coming from the ministry. It is a transparent, systemic arrangement that everybody sees and everybody understands. The fact that they got some kind of secretive discretions going on, and I therefore feel the need to take it away from the union and exercise it myself, points to favoritism, and favoritism points to corruption. And that is the prime example of administrative interference in every single aspect of doing business. An investor who comes here should not be going to the government to ask for a duty-free concession for some heavy-duty machinery or for some cheap piece of land somewhere that a Guyanese can't get. There must be a system of rules and a system of arrangements and a system of taxation that it is absolutely transparent, and if you get it, I must be able to get it too. That doesn't happen. And that level of favoritism is what empowers the ministers, empowers the government, centralizes power, and causes corruption. And we have had it for 50 years, and that is why we are where we are. I was a bit worried because I heard Mr. Richmond bemoan the fact that he comes again and can't even get to see the minister. Now, there should never be a situation where an ordinary Guyanese citizen feels he has an expectation to go and see a minister or needs to see a minister. Because the system should be so transparent and so predictable and so understandable that if he wants to come here to invest, he must know the rules. Go online and see what the rules are, what his entitlements are. Why does he need to see a minister? And the thing is, you know what? He does need to see a minister if he wants to come here, because he's got to beg for some favor, get some discretion, get some preference. Back to corruption. The system needs to be fixed, but to do that, those same people that hold on, clutch on to those discretions because it is a source of power for them, they need to have the love of country, the true patriotism, to let go of it and understand that systems are better than their personal favorites and their friends and family.
James C. Richmond, sir.
I don't even know where to start there, because
how do we fix the system?
That's what I'm saying. I don't even know where to start based on all the stuff that Mr. Jonas outlined there. It sounds like we're gonna just keep going through this for the next 50 years, because power corrupts. And if you don't want to give up power and you want to grab power all to yourself, we have a problem that will never be fixed. I'm wondering, and I actually know the answer to it. I'm wondering if the party membership can push their leadership to ensure that proper management is done whenever they have government. I'm wondering that if that is possible. I don't know how powerful is the membership of the party, or does the leaders in the party have the power, and that there's a problem again. So we will never move from where we are, and it's unfortunate unless we have a national front government with where we can say, okay, we have two major groups, the African group, the Indian group. So everything should be allocated 35% there, 35. We have the indigenous community here, so we give them 25%. We have other, and we give them maybe something like some structure like that. So regardless who is in power, things will some structure that will make it work.
All right. So Deputy Speaker Schuman, sir, is it possible the Parliament can address this issue?
I heard James asking the question, and I heard your question again. How do we fix it? Vishnu, when we started off campaigning in 2020, Tim and I and a lot of the other small parties were right on course, and we have not deviated from that course. There is an unwillingness. There is a lack of political will to want to change the structure. That is why we got into politics. What we need is that center force to now be able to compel, by virtue of our votes in Parliament, whoever sits there, that they now have to answer to the people through us, to become now that pivotal voice in Parliament that says, look, address the structural issues so that the people will benefit. Of course, we all know how that turned out, but we're unwavered in that commitment to the people of Guyana, because the country in itself needs a change. The country, if we cannot find a way, and James, you're asking a very pertinent question. One of the interesting things about the larger party structure is that in order to get your voice heard at that upper tier, it has to sound through so many barriers going up. And by the time it gets to the top, or even gets close to the top, someone kills it and says, you know what, man, you're being too loud. wait your turn. I've been here for 5, 10 years. You'll get your chance in the next 6, 7 years or whatever. They don't have a way to absorb those views. It's a very much top down. I'm going to tell you what it is. I'm going to tell you what you need to know and need to hear. But we're not having a way to feed into the system up. So the only way to address this issue is to have that solid center force to be able to bring the whichever administration, and in our view, it matters not which administration sits in office. It really does not matter. What is important is that we have that middle ground that is going to hold the administration accountable. Take some fundamental issues like constitutional reform. Constitutional reform only becomes appealing when you're out of office, when you're in the opposition. But when you get back in office, constitutional reform, you'll talk all the nice long lingo, and then you'll make up excuses that you don't want to see the leader of the opposition because he's not recognizing you. The Constitution does not say that the leader of the opposition has to recognize the president officially and go and, do whatever is required or what one perceives is required. The Constitution simply says consultation between the president and the leader of the opposition. By virtue of that, Joe Harmon has already accepted that he is the leader of the opposition and has acknowledged that there is a legitimate president occupying the office. What other acknowledgement do you need to move some of these processes forward? So I think we have to find a way to create and to build that center ground to be able to ensure that whichever administration, I will say whichever administration gets in there, that the country does not stay on the same path, stay on the same course. That is the only way.
Okay, so we are reaching to the end of tonight's program on Globespan 24/7. So I'll just ask a final point, Dr. Bhaskar Sharma, musician.
Well, I think it's a good beginning, Vishnu, but we should add a variety of more things here, not only the political big boys you have with you. We need people to address culture. It's an important thing. It's like the food we eat. It's important to bring back Hindi in the schools. Hindi is big, funded by this Canadian government, and we can do that in Guyana. It is done in Suriname. It is not racism to like one's culture, and I'm making that very strong. And I think we'd like to salute His Excellency in his one initiative that he's talking about. And I believe, I have great faith in him. I do not like to praise our politicians. We have seen in 40 years, many come and go. But I believe there are good things can happen. But platform like this provided by Nohar Singh can make better things happen for all of us. And continue in that trend. I am ready to serve in the area of cultural upbringing for Guyana, which I think I'm capable to do. I've been teaching at the Board of Education here in Canada for many, many years to Indians from India and not so much from Guyana. We have a duty to lend that kind of expertise to our people.
Thank you, Bhaskar, publisher, Equality News. Mr. Timothy Jonas, any final comment?
I think that the topic was wide today, Vishnu, and I'm glad that we were able to narrow it down. I very much like the question that you asked, and I hope one day we can have a conversation that focuses on that, steps that can be taken to make investment more attractive in Guyana. I think that is where the conversation needs to be, and that is where our focus needs to be. And if that is where we can direct our attention, I think we can do something. So thank you very much for having me. Thanks to Nohar.
Thank you, Timothy Jonas, chairperson of the ANUG, a new and United Guyana political party in Guyana. Mr. James C. Richmond, author, preacher, any final words?
Yes, I think the government should make a concerted effort to engage a diaspora so the diaspora can invest more in Guyana in businesses and so on, especially in this climate. And maybe that will help to make a lot of changes politically and all of that, help the process along and the transparency and proper management. Because as people from here abroad gets there, from the diaspora go there, they will want certain things done in certain way as well. And maybe over time, we can get to where we ought to be.
Deputy Speaker, Mr. Schuman, Liberty and Justice Party of Guyana. I know you had started at the beginning that there is a need and for an important role to be played by the diaspora in political affairs as well. The diaspora should not be excluded from participating in Guyana's politics just because they have been living abroad for these number of years and they left for abroad because of political issues at home during the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. So any final thoughts, comments?
I want to say thanks to James and Bhaskar and Tim, yourself at NOHAR and the technical team, and thanks to all the people who are listening. Vishnu, I go back to James's last point there about engagement. Whatever engagement that the government intends on doing with the diaspora, let it be genuine. Let it be driven by a genuine need to change the system so that they could come back and participate and support the development of Guyana. We are sitting here in Guyana. I don't think that we have the answers. The diaspora has the answers as to what they want to see in Guyana. And we now have an opportunity as policymakers to create that enabling environment for them to see or feel that their needs are being met in the country to be able to come back and contribute in whatever way that they wish to, or come back and participate. I think that is the very important role that we as parliamentarians play. And I look forward to any kind of engagement that we can undertake to facilitate that system being built so that the diaspora will always remain that very important component, not only from the financial contribution side, but also from the intellectual contribution side, the important element that would support Guyana's inclusive development.
The Ministry of Foreign Affairs has a diaspora unit, and I'm asking, urging, appealing to you that whenever the Minister of Foreign Affairs comes by, if you could raise those points you did tonight with him. That would be helpful to have greater engagement with the diaspora.
I always, whatever I hear from the constituents, are always brought up at a variety of levels with all of the ministers of government, my colleague parliamentarians, when we meet in the halls of parliament. Those things are always discussed. And how we channel it now, it is for them to determine.
And the president is going to be in New York next week. I think this will be his first overseas trip with the diaspora. I believe some diaspora engagements have been planned for sometime next week. And if an opportunity avails itself for me to engage with the president, I'm certainly going to bring up these issues. So, gentlemen, I want to thank you all tonight for spending over an hour and a half with us on Globespan 24/7. Senior Counsel, Mr. Timothy Jonas, Mr. James C. Richmond, preacher and author, diaspora activist, champion of diaspora here in New York, Mr. Bhaskar Sharma, a champion of diaspora in Toronto, Canada, publisher of Equality News, and of course, a very dear friend, the Deputy Speaker of the Parliament of Guyana, Mr. Schuman. Thank you, sir. Thank you all very, very much for spending an hour and a half this evening.
And thank you as well.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you all. Thank you all.